Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Founder's Code. My guest this morning is the founder and CEO of Talon.One, a platform that powers loyalty programs, promotions, and incentive management for some of the world's biggest brands, including the ones we all know so well, like Adidas, Sephora, KFC, Nordstrom, and Joe and the Juice. Please welcome to the studio, Sebastian Haas. Hi, Sebastian.
Hi, Shamil. Thank you for having me.
For our listeners, can you do a bit of the intro about the current scope and scale that you're operating at Talon.One?
Yeah, first of all, I'm one of the two co-founders at Talon.One. So I've been on this journey for a little over 10 years now and built this company up from the ground. My actual background is in advertising and marketing, but I think I never really wanted to work in that field. So I was, coming to Berlin, like seeing all of that startup ecosystem happening left and right, and then decided to give it a try myself after detouring a little bit in consulting. So I think Berlin is in general obviously a very great hub for building startups and coming up with new ideas. And in my current role, I'm obviously, even after 10 days, I'm doing a little bit of everything in the weeds. I'm in the trenches with the team and doing some of the strategic work. But I also have to say, at the current size of the company, I'm really happy that I can rely on very experienced people to work with. So I don't have to do everything myself anymore, which makes a huge difference.
And how many people do you currently have?
We're slightly over 300 now. So
awesome.
Yeah, and about half of them are based in the Berlin region. So it's a big global business by now.
It's usually so fascinating to kind of discover that kind of how you feel about the company when you stop knowing everyone. There's just a lot of people working, like we're like 200 people you don't know, and the company's still operational, especially coming from the startup.
It happens to me every day now. So I'm pretty much an office person. So I enjoy going to our Berlin office. Of course, you bump into people that just started, and I sometimes I find myself thinking like, do I know this person? Have we spoken? Like, what's the background? But that's also a part of the fun, right? Like you get to work with so many different people, so many experts in different fields. I love to do that, and I love to hear their stories. I love to hear about their background and where they come from. And it's a big sort of melting pot setup that we have, right? Like there's so many internationals. Berlin is obviously a very international city. So I think by now we have 55 different nationalities in the team. So there's literally people from everywhere in the world working together. So that's...
Is it hard to kind of keep the culture in check when you have people from 55 different nationalities? Because nationalities kind of do have some innate differences between themselves, don't they?
Yeah, obviously the cultural context, like the cultural code that everyone comes with is or can be very difficult to align sometimes. So there is friction without a doubt, like in people saying something that others think is offensive or, like misunderstandings that happen. But I think it always starts with the people itself. And when you join a company like Talon.One, when you come to a city like Berlin, like I think a general assumption is that you're pretty open-minded and you're respectful and you're well aware that there are certain boundaries that you might not want to be overstepping. So it starts with that. It literally starts with like everyone, taking care of each other, like trying to make each other feel comfortable and, respect the boundaries. So when thinking about culture, it's, I think, the people itself, respecting that everyone has a different background and then all wanting to work together for the same purpose, on the same topic, on the same targets and making it work. And I think that's, if you have that foundation, then, a lot of the rest will simply follow. So it's very great to have this like cultural diversity in the team. And that adds a lot of like, quality to working together.
Yeah.
You can see that in the office, for example, like people would bring, food or sweets when they visit their home country and, tell everyone about it. There's like all sorts of of these kind of little things that make it a great place to work at, So that's, I think, what we're really appreciating, what we're also looking for. And we try to enable this as the founders of this business as well, right? So we enjoy it ourselves.
Did it get harder to cultivate and maybe kind of safeguard that culture with having a lot of people working remotely? Because when you're a startup and you can every day see the people and they can see you and they kind of learn from your behavior, how to act, how to behave, what's okay, what's not okay. But when you kind of start expanding past 70 people, then that kind of border starts to kind of dilute itself.
Yeah.
Did you feel that?
Yeah, we feel it every day. It's hard work to maintain that, right? We're trying to look at culture slightly differently, maybe to how some other companies or other founders are looking at, right? For us, this is not a set of values that we all support, because in a lot of cases, values are, they are there, everyone knows them, but a lot of people do not actually live them. So it's more like something you write on the wall, and everyone knows it, but it's not really something that becomes part of your the organic culture of the team. So we didn't even want to get into that. So what we're looking after is a set of principles, operating principles. How do we all want to work with each other? What do we enjoy? What do we like? What do we don't want to see in collaborating with each other? So that's what we always fall back to not encounter any barriers in working together. But yeah, it's hard work when basically over half of the team is working fully remote. Berlin is the only office we have, which is just historically a lot of the internationalization of the business or of the team happened during COVID. So there was originally there was a plan to open an office in the US. We already selected a city. Then the pandemic started and we still had to grow, obviously. So we decided to hire people remotely. And then even after COVID, you find yourself in a situation where people are fully distributed. So where do you want to set up an office? Do you want to change your entire org just to have an office? So we decided that's not our path forward. So we're trying to sort of, make the best out of both worlds. And it's actual hard work. It takes a lot of a lot of different steps, actually, bringing people together occasionally, right? Within regions, within the hubs that are there, right? So we have obviously different amounts of people in the same sort of a broader region within a city or so. So we're trying to enable these people to come together. And for us, so far, and I have to say, I don't have the recipe that works, 100%. But I would say what works very well is this combination of enabling people to come together. So for us, this is, for example, co-working space allowance that we have for people that are not having access to our Berlin office. So they can come together, or they can simply get away from their home, if they want to have the real office feeling, and work from an office space. And then on top of that, it's the broader activity of bringing people together for different occasions, kicking off the year together within the region with the sales team, for example. And, just bringing a lot of people in the same location, doing workshops, include the leadership team. So everyone has face-to-face time with different people, right? So even for something like a go-to-market kickoff in the US region, we would bring our CHRO, for example, just to be part of that few days, work with the teams, have different workshops and so on. So everyone has face time, which really helps. But yeah, it's actual hard work. And I'm unfortunately, there are situations where still, people feel disconnected, they feel left behind. So we're trying to also do a little bit of oversharing in meetings like our town hall, where we talk about much more than just what happens in the business, but we also provide context around global economic situation and things like that to give everyone the same feeling of where we stand and what we're doing.
I still remember Facebook was trying to solve this problem, and they've actually imagined a world where we would all be wearing Oculus Quest and then just sit in a room and kind of almost see each other.
Yeah,
never really took off, but I guess they were trying anyway. to bring more people closer.
Sounds like a very, very weird and awkward setup to me. But like, I mean, I understand because the little conversations that happen in front of the coffee machine are obviously very important, and a lot of great ideas come out of this. So unfortunately, we just have to accept that we work in a reality where we cannot have this every day with everyone in the team, but we're trying not to do ridiculous things like coffee chats virtually, because that I don't think is the answer to this. But create platforms, create opportunities, and have the team exchange. It is sometimes involving even hobbies and private life if people are up for it, but we're not trying to
Yeah.
force it on the other side. But like it's different Slack channels for us, like topic theme-based Slack channels where people talk about arts and crafts and what they have been doing and working on in their free time.
Yeah.
It's
It's
maybe some
crazy, isn't it?
side projects that people do and so on. Like you can find, obviously with 300 people, it's very likely
Yeah.
that you have like some subgroups of anything.
Yeah, it's crazy because I also have teams who've been working on projects together for over like 3 years and they've never seen each other. And when we bring people to offsite, this is like the first time. They've been talking every day for the past like 3 years. And this is like the first time. It's kind of like a strange kind of world that we're living in. Because the way we were growing up, it was all about everybody cramped into the same space. Like you see these people, they're your friends, this is like a whole social circle, right?
Yeah.
And now it's kind of like we're trying to facilitate that, but yeah, I don't know how that's gonna look like in the future. And coming back to Talon.One, can we like because a lot of listeners are also founders who are trying to analyze the current like state of the world where we're going, and you have a lot of insight on like marketing and advertising, which right now is kind of like the main, I think, apart from sales that people are investing into to grow their companies. What does the current landscape look like in terms of marketing? What kind of actions are companies taking? And where does Talon.One fit into that?
Yeah, I think like on a broader level, like when I look back at the last 10 years, obviously that has been quite a journey. So when we started, I think businesses were still in a world where everything was pretty much focused, and I'm overstating here, but everything was around like customer acquisition, like the new customers that you wanna convince in buying your products or using your services. And with all the economic pressure throughout the last 10 years, that has clearly shifted to a more reactivation focused, retention based sort of setup. So, what we can see is that over the last 10 years, loyalty has become like the essential part of like a lot of the different brands and businesses marketing strategy.
Yeah,
And it makes sense, right? Like you wanna make sure you keep the customers that you have activated
LTV.
once.
Hmm.
Exactly. So that is clearly something that we saw throughout the last 10 years, which obviously is something that is the core of our platform as well. So
Yeah.
when we started Talon.One, the idea was always to be the unified promotion, incentive, loyalty engine that can help you in any type of scenario. So from the simple point-based loyalty programs to more complex reward strategies that include, certain loyalty tiers, you can do all of that on the same platform and connect to all of your different channels and, offline and POSs and all of the digital world. So that is, we're obviously in the middle of that, which is great.
Yeah.
When a general trend is in your favor, but that is clearly something we have seen. So a lot of that is around loyalty
Hmm.
nowadays, and it's still growing. And you can see that when you look at like the whole agentic discussion right now,
Yeah.
where a lot of that is around like the identity and the identification of users and where that will live in the future. And like everyone is slightly scared if that will be something that lives no longer under the control of a merchant,
Hmm.
and is like some agents that will do it for you, and you don't have any access to your customer base anymore. So like I think there's obviously a lot of things happening right now, but what this tells me is that loyalty will be more important than ever, and that's kind of like our view of the marketing world.
So how long do you think until the moment where I can just go into like a general shop and the shop will see my face or identify me somehow and be like, okay, this is Shamil. He takes a latte, and 2 out of 3 times he buys a bagel. So make sure to offer him a bagel. Like, he doesn't like sugar. His name is Shamil. And when the barista sees this, he's like, hi, Shamil. So latte without sugar. Do you want a bagel? They're fresh. Like, how far are we from having that in like every interaction out there?
From a technical standpoint, that's already there, and it's happening in some cases. Like you can do that, and like we are obviously doing that with some of our customers. But then again, user adoption and all of that transformation in sort of the offline world is a slightly more complex topic, I'd say. So that at the time, but it's quite fascinating because you see a lot of these like classic loyalty concepts being reworked, reconceptualized because of a more true personalization, which is a bit funny to me because everyone has been talking about personalization for the last 15 years, maybe. And no one, fully gets there. So it's always like, yeah, you have some personalization, you get your coupon code for your birthday, which is considered personalization. I mean, that's pretty weak, to be honest. Like there's obviously much more possible, and the technology is there. You need to bring your systems together. You need to bring from a merchant perspective, you need to bring your infrastructure together to successfully make this work, right? Like in this example that you just gave, it is about like, and this information about your identity actually surface at the point of sale. Mm-hmm. So if you think about like a fully digital world where you buy something in an online shop, it's pretty straightforward. You identify yourself because you log in, or you provide your identification data throughout the shopping process. But the point of sale, obviously, in a lot of these cases is different tech, it's different infrastructure. So it takes a little bit longer to bridge that. But we've seen good progress with some of the customers that we work with in overcoming this. And, like, it comes down to the point of like, do you allow the data to be exchanged? And then you can run like all of these personalization scenarios that are actually creating an exciting customer journey, customer experience, in any channel.
So I guess you're following all of the like political decisions made around like data privacy and just making sure how much are you able to use the data and collect the data to make sure that the people are getting the most value. Because it's kind of a paradox. People at the same time, they want all of this. They want people to know their taste, to give them what they want without them having to like think about it, select from like 20 different options. But at the same time, they're like, wait, I'm very careful about the data that I want to share. It's like, where do you keep the balance, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the balance is obviously with our customers, the merchants, the businesses we work with. But it's a delicate question. Yes, like what we do from our side is, first of all, we try to have the maximum level of trust, right? Like, I mean, we're a German business, so we're sort of GDPR native. We have all of the important InfoSec certifications and all of that. So we're trying to create, obviously, a very secure place for the data that we work with. But ultimately, it often just comes down to the consent of the user. Is that something the user sees value in, and then therefore gives consent to store your data, to use your data, for example, at the point of sale, to welcome you with, your preferred drink or the bagel that you're always picking. So the customer has to see the value. When the customer doesn't feel like there is a lot of value, why would you opt in for something like that? I think that's pretty clear. So yeah, you have to create this unique personal experience, and then this barrier is not that high anymore, because people want to feel part of that. People like it. Like when you go to your favorite coffee shop and you have that experience that you just explained, that's a very positive thing, right? Like I bet you as a person, you would be willing to give away some of your data for having.
I wouldn't mind them knowing what like my face and what kind of jeans I like. Like, please, use that.
But of course, there are other scenarios where, the consumer doesn't see the value, and then it becomes very difficult. Why should I opt in for a loyalty program that doesn't give me, a lot of benefit? And unfortunately, a lot of like these simple point-based loyalty programs are still operating like that. So
Yeah.
you collect points with every transaction, and then you have a limited path of like redeeming these points, not very personalized. It doesn't take into account your preferences, your order history, or any other activity or any other engagement that you have with a shop or an online shop. So that is something you have to consider, right? Like to make these sort of like programs and ultimately the user experience, the consumer experience successful.
And why have you decided to get into marketing? Like, what was it? So,
You mean why have I decided to study marketing and then never worked in the field
exactly.
like as a proper marketeer? That was
all of us have to make this decision about like what do we want to do, and we're quite young when we make those decisions. So, what was that thinking process like for you? How did you identify like that?
Yeah, for me that was like there was like a lot of a coincidence. So when I finished school, I had not a lot of ideas of what I could do with my life, to be honest. I considered different things and like was in a phase where I wanted to get a little bit of orientation. Back in the days, my girlfriend back then she had a pretty clear career path and she wanted to go to Berlin. And I was like, oh, maybe I just, come with you and experience how Berlin is. And then maybe I can find something there. So that's how I ended up being in Berlin. And then I looked at different options, actually applied for different things at the university.
Consulting.
One thing, what?
Consulting.
Sorry, go again.
Consulting.
No. Actually, consulting wasn't like on the top of my head back then. So I was on the path of looking into becoming a proper product designer. Like to design products. So
physical or online.
Yeah, physical products.
Okay.
So I looked at like the University of Applied Arts in Berlin, where you can study this. And I was like super young, super naive, no experience. I went there for like some info meeting or so. And they were like, yeah, we don't really know what you do here, because if you want to study this, you have to work on your portfolio. And that might take some time, right? Like, so come back when you have some work experience and when you worked on your portfolio. And I was like, I don't know if I really want to do that. I just want to get started. And then they suggested actually to take a look into a more marketing focused, but still fairly creative program they had. And I said like, okay, look, I can give it a try. Maybe that's something that I like. So I did that.
Was it like
it gave me a lot of
marketing?
Freedom. Sorry, go again. That was not something that was general, like communications, broader communications. So I found myself in there. Gave me a lot of freedom to experiment with other things left and right. So did some started working as a working student in a digital marketing agency, which was a very interesting experience. That business was growing quite well at that time. I had, it was a small team. So even as a working student, I had quite a strategic role there. I was in the middle of everything, worked together with the two founders of the agency, up to the point where they sold their business. It got acquired by a UK-based network of agencies, which is by now it's part of the Publicis group, I think. And so that was an interesting experience. And that's kind of where I got to experience entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. Like, at that time, working so closely to the founders, it almost like showed you the other side of the world. And especially going through acquisition, you've had this like, you can see it complete. You could see the company like kind of growing, co-founder thing, and then the company can be sold, and you can like, you participate in the process like of due diligence, like getting documents together, like talking maybe to the other side. So it kind of gave you a complete picture of like of the like startup VC world, kind of like merging.
Exactly.
There.
Exactly. And
what
then
were the main like lessons that you've learned?
The main lessons, the main lessons. I mean, for me, this was like a lot about learning, obviously. So learning how to run a business, learning how to make decisions, right? Like how to be strategic about certain opportunities. And I stayed there even after the acquisition. I stayed there for another year or so. At that time, I had finished my studies already, so that was a full-time job then. And I was part of like the post-merger integration team, which was another very interesting experience. I had never seen this before. So all of the challenges of like putting together all of these different businesses, they acquired quite a few agencies at the time. So like all of a sudden there was like 3 different parties that needed to be merged in Germany. So added
Are
a
you
lot of
allowed to talk
complexity.
about that experience? Because everybody hears, like, we see all the news about like mergers, acquisition, and the company got absorbed. What is that actually like inside when that happens and you have to like integrate?
I mean, there's obviously a couple of things, but one thing that it always comes down to is how's the cultural alignment between the different parts of the organization that you're trying to put together. I think that is, for me, that was a learning back then as well, because it takes a lot to understand the different cultures that are coming together and see where they are aligned and where there's potential friction, and then trying to work around that or mitigate that, because that's, at least from my learning, that's what can actually make this
Yeah.
whole process fail. So for me, this was very interesting to see, not just from a business perspective. I find that is maybe the easier part of merging businesses, right? Like you work on a joint business case. You obviously have, like in this scenario, it was like different services that were provided by different entities. So you put all of that together. Obviously, you try to define like a joint product, joint value proposal, but then like actually migrating like the different companies and the people that are behind it, that's where like a lot of the challenges are. So that was a great learning experience also, like from a like sort of people manager perspective, like to
Mhm.
work with all of these different people with the different interests that are coming together, right? Like if you imagine in such a scenario, obviously everyone is slightly scared because it means change. Like everyone, asks themselves about
Yeah.
like, what will the future look like? What will my role be? And so on. So that's, it's important to address. And yeah, so a lot of that was around, getting the right people in the right roles, like all aligned behind like the purpose. That was like a big learning at that
Mm.
time.
I feel like managing these kind of politics is sometimes it's kind of like on the emotional intelligence kind of level. Because on IQ, you have the business, you have the problem. It's like a like Rubik's cube. You just solve it as a puzzle. But then
Yeah.
you have all of these like people integrations with different aspirations. Like somebody doesn't like each other. Like somebody tries to take too much responsibility from other departments. And like right now as a founder, throughout your journey, you probably had to like navigate all of those things and be like, guys, sit
Yeah.
down, this is how it's gonna get done. Like these are the questions sometimes I'm just laying in bed before I go to sleep and I'm like, oh, what do I do about these guys? Like how do I get them like to be friendly, like to work together?
Yeah.
Like how do you handle, did you ever get better at that, maybe have some life hacks to kind of help maybe other founders who are right now thinking
Yeah,
about it?
100%. Like, so this is a very important, even until today, for us in
Mhm.
TalonOne building this company. So my learning back then was exactly what you pointed out, like different interests, different political situations,
Mhm.
like all coming together, of course, creating friction, creating conflict. And it is something, from a top level perspective, you don't want to have that. You want to, everyone join you in this journey and, like accomplish certain things together. So
You have so many
what
problems to think about: expansion, clients, growth, product. And you're like,
exactly?
guys, please.
Exactly. So so we actually turned that into one of our operating principles at
Mhm.
TalonOne, which we refer to as no silos. So, like this is what usually happens. And it just happens organically in a growing business. You build out different domains, like you have experts in these domains. They become team leads, they become directors, they become leadership at some point. And it's a natural process of people getting very protective of their space. That's just what always happens. So you have to actively work against that. and my understanding is like from the start. So basically you want to prevent these silos from being created. Like you don't want to have people, teams, or departments operate in isolation. You want to always make sure they collaborate. There's, like cross-functional, cross-organizational projects they work on and hold up like a really high standard of alignment. And I think that is, for us, that's one of the key components of being successful as a team. And you can, me and my co-founder, we would talk a lot about it, where we make statements around like how we win as a team, because that's ultimately it. Like when we're an enterprise focused business, right? Like we work a lot with like big corporate companies, and it actually takes a lot of people to be successful in this collaboration. It's not like, one salesperson is really good, reaches out to a customer, sells our product, and that's about it. There's like plenty of people involved in that process, right? You have supporting functions, right? Like you maybe have a legal counsel being involved. You might have someone from finance being involved in like structuring the deal together with the deal team. You have technical people being involved, right? Like, to talk about integration in our case. You have salespeople involved. You have like some people involved that are more on the strategic account management side. And all of these people, they have to work together to make this a successful project. So, I cannot have anyone in this scenario, trying to be like super protective of their environment, because this is not how it works. This will become a blocker sooner or later. So I think from a founder perspective, what I think it takes is that you build out your sensors around detecting this sort of like, isolation, like the political game, basically, that starts at some point, and prevent these silos from happening, right? Because ultimately you want to have everyone work together, come together, work as a team. And that's what creates success. That's my understanding of like, doing this for 10 years now in Talon.One and in my first company before. So that's what it takes, right? And so that's why we decided to make that a part of the principles that we work with. And I think it is something that if you ask people working at Talon.One, that is something that everyone enjoys, right? Like in general, that has like a spillover effect on all of the company, right? Like you have like people just being generally helpful when you have a question. Like you won't find anyone in our company that is like, leave me alone, that's not my business. Right? Like people will try to help you, because they understand like why you're doing things and what you're working for, and everyone is working for the same purpose. I realize it sounds like everything is like pretty like pink and
I know
like
how hard it is
super healthy. Obviously there's friction, but like that's what we look for. Like we're trying to detect this early, point it out. We would have conversations with people when we feel like it's going in a wrong direction on that side. Just it's work.
And you briefly mentioned your first company. Can you talk a little bit about RapidApe and like what kind of led to the creation of the company? And what are the main lessons that you've learned through that experience?
I think for general understanding, like how I work and also how my co-founder here, Chris, works, is we love to solve problems or challenges with technology. And, we're builders. So we would look at a problem and try to solve it with a product. Right. And that is what I have done with Talon.One, and that is what I have done before. So when I at some point left the marketing business, I joined a Berlin-based company builder and VC at the time, and did some project work in the portfolio just to get another angle into, like the startup ecosystem in Berlin. And a couple of these projects were on the more analytical side, trying to help optimize certain businesses and look into how their marketing plans work and different other things. And one of these companies was spending a lot of money in TV advertisements and had actually no idea what that delivers. So we started looking into that problem, started looking into different approaches and, like trying to measure performance. And that challenge became then the idea for a product. So what I built with my first company, which was called RapidApe, was a TV monitoring and analytics suite for companies that would advertise on TV and needed more performance data for their campaign or advertisement performance than just getting, data about like how many people have seen your spot at, this and this time. So what we did is we obviously built like a system of algorithms trying to help you get understanding in the actual performance, like simple things like how many visits did you get right after airing TV spot? How many app downloads did that generate? But also, taking a look at other marketing channels and understanding what the impact of a TV campaign is, and then providing like all sorts of reports and dashboards. It included real-time monitoring because we wanted to do this real time. We didn't want to wait until you have like a final schedule from, like the Nielsen's of the world. So we try to make that faster and developed that for about 3.5 years until it got acquired by the ProSieben Group here in Germany.
Nice. Because I guess it's quite hard for companies advertising on TV to kind of know even like what do we expect. We pay like it costs a lot of money, and like how much revenue do you expect to get from this? It's usually like a very hard kind of question.
Yeah, and also the question, what do you optimize for? Like, how do you understand what works and what doesn't, right? Like, I mean, you have, and obviously that was a different time. That was, when Netflix was just starting to internationalize. So by now that priority has shifted quite drastically, I would say. But back then there was a lot of money being spent in TV advertisements. All of these startups would broker media for equity deals with the broadcasting networks, for example, and they wouldn't have any idea of like if that actually makes sense. So what we try to help them with is like getting this understanding, obviously, like where they should optimize their performance, right? Like, and it came down to the level of like analyzing different like placements, for example, different stations, different formats. A lot of these companies could then run A/B testing for different versions of their TV spots, and we would help them understand like which version works better than others. So that was like, that was pretty much me coming from a performance marketing background, having worked for this digital marketing business, and then, transforming that into an offline channel optimization product.
Because I have a lot of friends like operating in Europe, and they're building multiple startups throughout their journey. And usually when they don't see like a substantial growth within like 2-3 years, and like, I don't want to be doing, because it starts feeling like a job. So they're like, okay, I need to sell this company fast so I can work on something that I'm noticing is out there and nobody's kind of taken that. I want to be able to do that. But for them, like to sell the company, it's not even that easy. Like you can't, because the lesson they learned is like you can't do it yourself. You usually need like a broker who understands like what companies are looking for. What kind of experience was that for you for that merger?
I mean, that wasn't like something that we specifically focused on, to be honest. And that's still, until today, I still believe that you shouldn't be building a company just for an exit scenario, because that influences a lot of things you do, and you might be on a completely wrong track. Like you want to build like my understanding is you want to build a great product. And, at some point that journey might involve an acquisition, right? But you shouldn't overly optimize for that scenario. Of course, you need to optimize your numbers, and it shouldn't be a horrible business, and the product needs to work, and the customers need to be happy. All of that sounds logical, but it's hard work to focus on it. So like back in the days, we never really optimized for that. We wanted to build a great product. And that is exactly the same thing that we decided to do with Talon.One. When I started Talon.One with my co-founder, we were like, this will probably be a 20 people business at some point, and it might become profitable, and that's great. And then let's see how far we can take it. We didn't imagine that like we would get to 300 people and global business. So it's like we've completely focused on making this a great product for the customers, generate value. That's like the number one priority, right? So you don't want to build a product that is great in selling, but then has a big churn problem, right? Like, so a lot of what we did in the early years was, it's pretty simple. We worked on the product. We didn't focus on generating X amount of revenue in the first couple of months, like launching an alpha version after 3 months or anything like that. Yeah. We knew it would take time, and that's what we focused on. So make it a great product, and then it's kind of, the philosophy is a little bit like, if you have a great product, you can build a great company around it, and a great company will always find a buyer at some point if that's what you're aiming for. And I mean, looking at Talon.One, obviously, this is not like a family business that we will inherit to our kids, but we're not optimizing for any exit path. We're building this business for what it is. It is a good product. Customers love to work with us. We love, like to work with all of these exciting customers and help them with their challenges, create value. We can see the value every day. Customers can see the value every day, and everyone enjoys like being part of this. So that's kind of what we have in mind.
Talking to practicing founders, who stay with the company for years and years. Like I was talking to Aitik Tank on the show, who's the founder and CEO of Jotform, which is like a really large company, and he's still doing it 20 years in, and he's excited and he's moving forward. Because why sell when you have a profitable business that covers all of your expenses? Like you don't need to worry about money, and you can play as much as you want to like unleash your creativity going forward.
VCs would say differently though, right? Like, I mean,
they need the return.
So, I mean, you need to balance that, obviously. Like, I mean, also like for us, like there's lots of really great VCs involved in that journey with Talon.One. And it's like, we're all agreeing on a couple of like principles here. So, like they understand we want to make this a great business. We want to make this a great product, and that this takes time, right? So no one came in with the expectation to sell this company within 3 years or something, right? So that was never the plan. But again, like a lot of what we did was focusing on the product, focusing on the value that the product generates, and the rest sort of follows, right? So, but I understand, like you have to be ready for that, and you have to be willing for doing this journey for a long time, right? Like if you're like type of founder that says like, I'm really good in initiating these ideas, but as soon as I reach 20, 25 people, that's not my thing anymore. Then that journey will look different, right? But for us, that was always like the understanding, we grow into this, everyone grows into this, and we're ready to do it, as long as it's fun. There's no problem in doing it another 10 years, right? Like, so that's part of it. And if it wouldn't be fun, then we wouldn't be doing it anymore. I mean, it sounds simple, but there's of course a lot of other factors that influence it, right? Like, I mean, you can build the best product. If there's no market for it, you might not do it for 10 years then, right?
And you've mentioned that you have like everybody eventually grows into things. What kind of main things have you noticed that are different between Sebastian that we see like at the start thinking about, oh, this can be a 20 people company someday, to Sebastian we see now with different perspective, different like level of responsibility, ambition, and feeling what is possible? What are the main differences that you can see?
The main difference is maturity, I think. So back in the days when I started my first business, I was like super ambitious, like, trying to solve everything myself. Like, I know everything better. I know how it needs to be run, type of this. And with experience, then you understand this is not the best path forward. This is not what makes it efficient. This is not what makes it successful. So learning to let go is definitely part of that journey. And then like for me, this was understanding that, working with like a lot of people that know different things that are important for your business way better than I do myself. It's that was part of the learning journey, right? Like, so, and now it's I really enjoy like working with all of these great minds, these great people, the great experience that comes together. Like, I find myself in people explaining to me how things should be done way more than I have to explain to anyone else how we should do things, which is great. So my role has obviously moved from, like doing things myself into aligning everyone behind the same idea. Right? Like when you have like 300 people, obviously I do work a lot with our C-level, and then it's more about like keeping everything aligned, like prioritizing, and of course, calling the shots in some situations, making the decisions. But it needs to be a healthy culture of not simply overruling everyone because you think that you know how it should be done. Instead, it needs to be like getting everyone behind the idea of why you think this is the right thing to do. So the why is much more important for me now than it was when I started my business, because back then the why was just in my head and everyone else needed to sort of follow. And now it is more about like, explaining these, giving the context and getting everyone behind the idea.
In practice, for example, we take you 10 years ago. You would sit in a room with some of the people on the project and you'd be like, this is how I want it to run because I've thought it through. This is how it should look like. How is it different now?
Much more of a control freak back then, right? Like you would just say, like, okay, look, I need this to be done. I can do it myself because I believe I'm the fastest in doing this. So you sit there and you work all night and you put together like your spreadsheets and all of that stuff, right? Now it is much more like, okay, look, we believe we need to do this because whatever the market requires it or so. So, like who do we need to make this a success? Like who do we need to involve? Like who do we need to get behind this idea and support it? And what does it mean for the different functions, different support functions, the different departments in the team? So it's much more of like an alignment type of managerial role, of course, although I don't see myself like being the greatest people manager, but that's just what happens when you have such a growing organization. So the difference is listen to people, understand different perspectives, and there might be more ways of just what you think is the right thing to do. And in the end, you have to take these as like different puzzle pieces and put it all together and get everyone behind this idea. Doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has to agree to everything all the time, right? But as long as you can like consciously disagree and then still commit on something, that's what you want, right? Like, so not everyone needs to like every single idea, but.
And I just came up like, it's very interesting to me. If we take Sebastian back, as a control freak at the start, he was like, I have this vision, I want to execute. Back then, you didn't have like AI tools that allow you to do all of those things. Like you had to spend the whole night working on spreadsheets. Right now, you can take Claude Opus 4.6 and you just give it all the context within like 20 minutes. You have a really good spreadsheets with all of the data and kind of different evaluations. So you can kind of almost work like with the team, but within your own head, within LLM systems and agentic solutions out there. If Sebastian back then had all of this tooling, do you think the path would have been a lot different?
Probably wouldn't have hired anyone back then. No, I mean, yes, of course, that's obviously it offers a lot, right? Like a lot of like productivity that you can gain, like using all of these different platforms. But I strongly believe you still need to know what you're doing, right? Like, so in the end, you still need like experts controlling it, orchestrating things like agents for you, because otherwise it's going to be a big mess. So I'm obviously curious about what the future brings, but as of today, I would say like, you still need your engineers controlling the agents that produce the code. Good thing is like they can be way more efficient, they can be way more productive with all of these tools, but it could not be me doing all of this. So, but that's maybe also because of the product that we're building, because of the business that we are, because of the customers that we work with and so on. Like it might be different in, let's say a B2C startup.
Yeah. And over the last 3 years, I think we see a lot of largest tech companies investing billions of dollars into marketing and advertising that if you're not a one-man AI company, then you're late, then you're over, like AGI is around the corner, like, and when you look in reality, it's like people take time to get like through adoption, to kind of understand the technology, where it fits. with your observations around the industry and where we are with actually adopting all of this new like LLM powered AI agents out there, what are you noticing? What is your view?
So, I mean, my perspective is, and that's what we're doing here at Talon.One, is like we're looking for value. And that, like, if you look at what AI means for a business, there's an internal perspective that's all around like productivity, efficiency, like doing all of these things faster, better, more. And then there's the external perspective, which is more like what goes into the product that is AI, right? Like how can we support that? So from a product AI perspective, we've been, like in a lot of cases where we've seen certain things pop up, like certain trends, we've tried to understand, does this really add any value for our customers? And in a lot of the cases, we've come to the conclusion that it doesn't. So we decided not to just, jump on the hype train and do something because it was big on TechCrunch the other day, but instead look for the real value and focus on generating value for the customers. And I strongly believe that's the right perspective. So why should I implement, like even the simplest chatbot into the system when that ultimately can only answer 3 different questions and doesn't really bring any value, right? So you won't find that in the product of Talon.One. So what we're looking for is like, where can we really generate value with, like having AI perform some certain actions on the data that we have and develop products out of that. That's what we're looking for. And a lot of other companies I've seen left and right, like, like all of a sudden everyone has a chatbot in their UI. Like, yeah, okay, that's cool. And it helps maybe in some cases. And yes, of course, we also do like tiny little things like that, like in our documentation, in our product documentation, you can now with the click of a button get a summary of certain things. That's cool. That helps you to understand things, like digest content easier. But in other cases, it's like, yeah, of course, everyone needed to have an AI chatbot integrated into their UI just because the possibility was there and everyone does it. So we're trying to differentiate. We're trying to look at the real value that these things bring. That is for the product perspective, and it's kind of the same for the internal productivity, like connected perspective, right? So yes, you can do great things, and I think everyone that has been working over the last year or two with like any of the LLMs, it can be a big benefit and it can be a big distractor in a lot of things, right? Like quality of content is not necessarily good. Like we've come a long way with this, so it definitely got better. I'm not ignoring this, but you still find yourself trapped in like some loops of like endless, improvements that don't really improve anything. So you need to overcome this. You need to go around this, and in some cases, that it's just not where we are with AI right now. So it needs more time, and then like we're also trying to focus on where can we add value, in what processes, for example, can we add value when using AI, right? Like simple example would be, of course, we have to sign a lot of NDAs with customers and prospects, right? Like, and unfortunately, not in all of the cases we're able to use our own template that we know inside out, obviously. So we have to, analyze, the legal counsels have to look at NDAs from customers. So that is something where you can actually use AI. It's pretty straightforward. You use AI to flag certain things to help you understand it. Improves speed, it improves, like even accuracy sometimes because people make mistakes. So of course we have embedded these type of things into like some of our processes, but we're looking for the real value. We're not just jumping a lot of things, and try to enable the team to use the right platforms for experimentation. That is something we do, like so people can experiment with certain things and then, share their learnings with the team, and also share things that do not work. Right? Because that's equally important, I find. And then, maybe there's a couple of things that other teams want to adopt and use for their own processes. So we're trying to build an environment that enables people using different technologies. What I find is challenging is these things evolve so quickly. Like, you might bet on OpenAI this month. Next month, it might be Claude and Anthropic. And, after that, it's going to be Google and Gemini again. So it's always this sort of balancing act between using the right technology for the right setup, for the right scenario, for the right process, and not getting trapped into like just waiting for the next tool to come around and provide something that is even better than what you've seen before. So it's kind of that's what I find is a challenge in in all this different tools that you can potentially use right now.
And as last question, I wanted to ask, what advice could you give to all of the founders who are also looking through all of the news, reading through all of the hype? One day it's like Claude releases something. Now we need to like MCP. Everybody's installing MCPs. You see them, everybody's trying to sell you MCP connectivity, and you're like, why do I need? But at the same time, there's always like this worries, like, oh, maybe somebody using all of those technologies are gonna revolutionize the industry and take over. Maybe we need to be doing something. How would you advise? Because I know that you take a very like patient approach with analyzing technology. How would you advise them to approach this thing to make sure they don't move into something which will just get them off the cliff or just waste a lot of their time?
I mean, like, first of all, you have to realize that we can allow ourselves to do this because we're not like a SaaS platform that is aiming at the consumer or needs to be always on top of like the technology game from that perspective. We are seen as part of the infrastructure, and infrastructure is a lot about performance, stability, security, right? So I think we need to, in some cases, we need to not be the first ones experimenting with something because that might have a very negative impact
Very
on
dangerous.
how we work with our customers, right? Like, so that's slightly different perspective on this. So, but I mean, what I would like really advise is always look for value. Like you want to find real value in these things.
What are the questions you ask yourself to understand if there is a real value?
I think you need to differentiate what the value actually is, because in some cases it might be a good thing to jump on something and implement something because it drives marketing, right? And that might be value for your business. Mm-hmm. So don't get me wrong there. Like there's still like sometimes it makes sense to jump on a trend and do something because that has a big marketing impact that gives you leverage in the market. But in other cases, the value might be in something completely different, right? Like it might be something where you can increase your performance or so that has a more business impact. And there you might want to be more careful. So I think you need to ask yourself like what is the value that it would provide me if using a certain technology or doing something with AI, with the help of an AI tool, with the automation that I can build. Is that something that is reliable? Is that something that is scalable, right? Like all of these questions. And again, like we're on a very infrastructure heavy side of things. So that might be different for consumer facing products, obviously.
So it's not the kind of like move fast, break things model, right?
Yeah, that I don't think that would work for us, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, for experimentation, it does. Yeah, but like, I mean, we're always very careful when it comes to like then doing anything in production.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I think it's going to be extremely exciting for everybody who's going to be listening to learn all about your view, the realistic view of the industry, and to learn about your path and about the work you do at Talon.One. I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Hopefully stay in touch.
Bye-bye.